I'm delighted to be having a very quick chat again today with Douglas Phillips. We wanted to give you a quick update on the film project because I know many of you have been absolutely engaged with that, interested in that, and some of you have reached out to ask on progress. And I think it's only fair, especially to those who have donated, to give you an update on the progress of that project and to emphasize why, in the light of the election, we think this is even more important than it was before. Douglas, over to you.
Well, first of all, this is the week of the election of President Donald Trump to the President of the United States. That has sent shockwaves around the world. And first and highest on our mind, those of us that care about Ukraine, is what does this mean for Ukraine and what can we do about it? Well, there's a lot to say on that subject because this is a pivotal moment. My opinion is that the next 2 months are absolutely vital to influencing the public discussion. Now, there's a lot of things about Trump, which are, in the record, things he said, which have been disparaging and discouraging for the people of Ukraine, understandably so. I think there are some misunderstandings. One is that he is just committed to Putin. I think Trump thinks very differently. I think he's his own guy. And by that, I mean, while he is not committed to Ukraine and he may or may not be very sympathetic to Putin, I think he's about himself. And he's about winning, in his own mind, the Nobel Peace Prize through a highly unfeasible prospect, et cetera. Well, why am I mentioning all of this right now? I'm mentioning it because we do not want the Tucker Carlsons and even the J.D. Vances of the world to be influencing thinking on the next steps. And Donald Trump has a very, very big challenge ahead of him. And the challenge ahead of him is, how does he keep the promise that he's made to hundreds of millions of people? He said that he's going to bring the war to an end before he even comes to office. I think it's difficult for most people to take that seriously, but clearly he's going to try to do something. He has to, or else he loses face on it, even if it's only delaying till later. Here's the point for now. We have to influence the public now. We have to recognize that Donald Trump will have military advisors and others that are outside sort of the Tucker Carlson world. And we need to get empathy, facts, and information out there so that we are in the strongest position, both in terms of public pressure. Also, we have to keep in mind the changing balance in the Senate, the House still undecided. There's all sorts of other factors here. So the bottom line is there never has been a more important time to frame the issue, to build empathy, which comes to Silicon Valley, Jonathan Finks, myself, a filmmaker, and others. So we are hopefully going to be headed over to Eastern Europe, where we will begin filming probably 10 to 15 days from the airing of this show. That's our mission. That's what we want to do. And we're going to be telling a story which we think is very important. Jonathan, you and I are going to be going to the front lines, not on this immediate trip, but afterwards. The first trip that we're going to be shooting our sizzle. We're going to be shooting the introduction. That's assuming we bring in just a little tiny bit more.
This is worth sort of
I
explaining
think
to the audience. We're 65% of the way to the sizzle trailer. In fact, it wouldn't take much more just to nudge it because the first tranche is $15,000. The full project is around 100, 120. And we're almost there with that first tranche. And it's enough for you to actually, I think, do the sort of planning and logistics on the assumption that we'll get that across the line in the next week.
I think if we have $4,000 to $5,000 come in this week, our film begins. And we want to begin the film, in the 2 weeks after the presidential election. We want to get it going now. One of the questions that's coming up in the future is this whole concept of the demilitarized zone that the Trump administration is proposing as a solution. We're going to be on that front line. We're going to be filming on the front line. We're going to be taking people there. And I think people will realize that this concept is archaic, inapplicable, and certainly out of line with the reality of folks on the front line. But the heart of our story is not that. That's like a peripheral issue. The heart of our story is the courage, the desire for freedom, the international community coming together at this pivotal moment in the history of the world to stand together, and what that looks like. And we want people to have a sense of the humanity of the situation. We want them to build empathy for real people, real characters, individuals that they're going to meet as part of our documentary journey, so that they can get who themselves will be telling different pieces of the story, both strategic and personal, and the very things that folks need to hear. Jonathan, my son, Honor, was in Pokrovsk, and afterwards he went to Brussels, where he spoke before members of parliament at the European Parliament. And they were wonderful. They listened to him. But what was, I think, interesting was they weren't necessarily in touch with the reality of life on the ground in Ukraine. Not all of them. They weren't necessarily aware of all the different factors. These are leaders of the world. So we need to let common people and leaders of the world both empathize with individuals and also have a real sense of things on the ground. That's what you and I are trying to do with this documentary.
And this is super important because there have been many, really substantial, really interesting documentary films made. And the challenge of making a film is, of course, that often you need to bring in finance, which requires you to then not make the end product fully available, free to air to everybody for all time. So you'll have this, it'll have an impact, and then it kind of disappears. The aim of this project is to have independent finance so that we can make this documentary free to anybody who wants to watch it at any point with no restrictions. And this is super important. Yes, we want to get it into film festivals. Yes, we want to get it in front of expert audiences, and yes, we want to get it into Ukrainian societies, Ukrainian institutes around the world. That is going to be a key objective. And given our network, I think there's a good chance of being able to show this in legislatures in the EU, in the UK Parliament, and potentially in Washington, Berlin, Paris, and other places. I think between us, we've got enough connections to be able to rustle that up and have a huge impact that way. But ultimately, film communicates in a way that all of the think tanks and the papers and the articles and the op-eds in the world cannot communicate. It puts you in the reality of people on the ground. I think this is what this project is all about, having a big impact in the short term, but having a really big impact in the long term as well, by making sure there's absolute unencumbered access to this material for all time. People can watch it as many times as they like, share it with friends and relatives. And there's none of these sort of paywalls and barriers that you often encounter when you're trying to watch, even some of the best independent documentaries.
Very true. And right now, visual media is the means that are winning the hearts of people. Social media, like programs like your own. If you want to understand what happened in the American public with the recent election, one way to think about it is the triumph over long form podcast versus national media. National media outlets are waning in influence dramatically. They may be gone sometime in the future, but these long form podcasts, documentaries, and other things that are digestible to people have incredible impact. So in terms of how do we get the biggest bang for our buck in influencing people and politicians, documentaries have a profound impact. And by the way, Putin has been using them. Putin used them with guys like Oliver Stone and others to completely undermine the right in America and turn them from the Reagan era conservatives to almost pro-Soviets, if not pro-Soviets in spirit anyways, I'd put it that way. That's the power of these little clips on YouTube and on social media being rebroadcast on long form podcasts, et cetera. Well, you have done a great, your show is fantastic, Jonathan. I love it. And you've done such a great job of fighting against that. This documentary is going to be part of that process. And we're very hopeful that it will make a difference, especially in the months to come.
And we're going to do more of these updates. And I think just the last point on that, it's so incredibly important. I was listening to some historians today talking about the Tucker Carlson podcast when he interviewed a so-called historian. In fact, this isn't a historian. This is kind of another podcaster. That's not to diminish podcasting as an activity. This guy clearly is on the grift, and he created this podcast with Tucker Carlson that basically said, look, Hitler, yeah, he did some bad things, but he wasn't the real bad guy of World War II. That was Churchill. He started the whole thing. Something that is just such a twisting of reality. This podcast has received 33 million downloads. And for people who don't have context, people who don't have some kind of grounding in reality, then these things can appear quite plausible. And this is how they work. What we're trying to do is to say, look, we have a moral objective to try and represent reality as we find it, not fashion reality into something that we want to sort of, place over that, or something we want to use to manipulate people's emotions and behaviors. We want to go out there and find a dramatic but true and authentic story, and we want to bring it back. And I think that is what the project is all about.
Very true. You mentioned that issue of the Tucker Carlson broadcast. I did a deep dive on that myself. I've been involved in World War II documentaries and filmmaking since 2005. I've produced many shows on World War II. That show was a symphony of ignorance, unlike anything I've seen in recent years. And the individual who was behind it had also posted, I don't know how you could put it any other way, but Nazi praising memes and posts and various other things. And the fact that millions and millions of people have not read a history book, apparently, or are not aware of the extraordinary sacrifice and events surrounding World War II, down to the point where this particular gentleman would make claims, and Tucker, not knowing what was right or wrong and not having historical context himself, would set out comments that are so completely in contradiction to history. And Americans thought, wow, isn't this great? We're finally getting the truth. The deep state falsehood is finally being revealed about World War II. This has got to come to an end. I'm not saying that they don't have the right to broadcast whatever cockamamie ideas they want to broadcast. What I'm saying is we have to take the initiative. We have to speak to basics. We have to speak to fundamentals. Jonathan, here's a basic. It's wrong to invade somebody else's country. That's a basic. If we can't agree on that, we've got problems. Here's another basic. Raping, mass murdering, torturing, and physically mutilating civilians or soldiers is criminal and should be viewed as one of the worst things happening in the world today. That's a basic. I don't know that there's agreement on that anymore. And it's because we are not out there making the case and explaining what's happening. Well, we'll be doing that with our documentary. We have to do that with our documentary. And to our friends that are listening, if you can reach down and help us out this week, just with a little bit, what a difference it will make. It'll get us over there. We'll get this job moving forward. And hopefully it will save lives and persuade leaders and average folks.
That's it. And just to give people the context there, you're going to be filming Igor, who is the leader of the aid convoy, in his spare time. I'm surprised he has any spare time, but in spare time, he does an extraordinarily dramatic sport, which is dog sled racing. It's the ultimate expression, I think, of energy and exercising your freedom and agency. That, of course, is going to be very cinematic. That is going to be the lead part, the start of the documentary film. We can get that in the can. That can be filmed. We can share it with the audience. That'll help drive the donations to get us over the line for the full project. And we're almost there with what we need to film that introductory trailer. So please do share this with friends. If you know anyone who may be a potential major donor who wants to help get Ukrainian voices out there and ultimately support the work of these aid convoys, then do please reach out and follow the links in this video. Well, Douglas, we're going to do more of these updates. I think we should do them every couple of days now. The project really is starting to roll. So we'll have more updates for the audience as things start happening. We'll maybe even get a little film of you in the Gdansk airport as you guys arrive. I think that would be great. For now, though, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. My pleasure.
All your engagement with the videos on this channel is massively appreciated, as well as encouraging comments and the financial support you provide. Some of you will have donated to Ukrainian charities, including the ones listed in the descriptions of these videos. I know many of you ask how you could be doing more to help Ukraine, and that includes me. Well, here is news of a project that I think could make a huge difference. It's been initiated by Silicon Curtain, and I hope will support Ukrainians on the ground and in the diaspora and create real impact to help ensure a Ukrainian victory. It's a documentary film to be made in Ukraine later this year and shown internationally, hopefully at film festivals and on Silicon Curtain as well. We aim in the film to follow the 75th aid convoy to Ukraine by a remarkable team based in Poland, delivering vital medical, humanitarian, and military aid that helps Ukrainians remain resilient. No doubt the efforts of this team has saved innumerable lives of Ukrainian servicemen and women fighting on the front line of freedom. We have a unique opportunity to share authentic stories on the world stage through this film via film festivals, social media, and streaming to Silicon Curtain. The film will provide a counterweight to Russian propaganda films such as Russians at War. It will show spontaneous stories gathered on the journey as we travel the length of the front line. Filming footage and interviews along the journey, we will have a unique opportunity to convey the shared humanity and common cause of Ukrainians living with war. The film will focus on stories of hope and resilience with the war as a backdrop and aims to create a compelling narrative and tone that is entirely authentic. Well, here's the important bit. We're aiming to raise £12,000 to record the dog sled tournament and create a stunning trailer for the project. Overall, the project will cost up to $100,000 for end-to-end production and distribution. For the price of a DVD rental or a streamed movie, you could help create a film that raises awareness of Ukraine's struggle and generates funds for further aid convoys. Supporters of the film will get early access to see it and free access to the film for all time. This is a bold and ambitious project, but it will be led by an experienced documentary team with a professional cinematographer. It is time, I think, to join together to achieve something powerful and unique for Ukraine. After reviewing many project ideas, we feel that this is the best way that we can have an impact. Tentatively titled To the Edge of Freedom, here is a short description of the film. A world champion dog sled racer navigates dangerous obstacles through the apocalypse-like battle zones of Ukraine's front line, delivering life-saving aid to ordinary heroes engaged in extraordinary acts of valor. Igor Traks, the team leader, is a remarkable personality and relentless supporter of Ukraine throughout the full-scale war. The film starts in Finland at the World Championship Dog Sled Tournament with Igor. Fresh from his 11th World Championship in dog sled racing, Igor Trans leads his foundation's 75th humanitarian mission to the front lines of war-torn Ukraine. For this mission, Igor's team is joined by a few friends from the US and UK who will not only provide hands-on support, but share what they learn on the ground with news sources in the West. Our cameras follow Igor from Finland to Gdansk, to Lviv, to Mykolaiv, Kherson, to Dnipro, Pokrovsk, Kharkiv, and other frontline cities facing the brunt of Russian aggression. Along the way, they will meet colourful and determined individuals fighting for their families' right to survive. Igor and his team navigate life and death situations to bring much-needed supplies, visiting bunkers, hospitals, and units whose success may not merely determine the fate of this ancient culture, but of the West itself. The film will follow Igor's latest aid convoy to the front line and back again. I hope this description will inspire you to become part of the film project and make a difference to the war's outcome, a war that Ukraine must win clearly and decisively. Please do find the donation link in the description of the video and do reach out to me if you have any questions at all about the project and its intended impact.